Hey, it's Doug with Backcountry Pilgrim, and I had just spent my first night in a bivy shelter. One of my subscribers was kind enough to send me the Outdoor Research Helium Bivy bag or shelter. I'll explain the difference between those in a minute. And I just took it out for its test run here in Point Reyes National Seashore. It's the first week of December, so it is nice and cold, plenty of moisture in the air. I thought it would be a good first night test for the bivy. The word bivy comes from the word bivouac, and it refers to basically an emergency small solo-sized shelter that mountaineers used to use when they found themselves in a place where they couldn't put up a tent. At its most stripped down, a bivy is basically a rain jacket for your sleeping bag. It's just a sleeve of waterproof material that you slide your sleeping bag into, and that will keep the rain and the wind from soaking through the bag and ruining its thermal properties. So you can think of bivy camping as basically protected cowboy camping. Sleeping outside in a bivy is a pretty lightweight, small volume way to go, and the technology has increased to where now you can get things that are called bivy shelters. A bivy shelter is basically a structured bivy bag, so it's going to have some kind of pole system or something to keep its shape. This keeps the material from sticking on your face or coming into close contact with your bag. Now, the Outdoor Research Helium is one of the top-rated bivy shelters out there. It is very lightweight. You don't need stakes, you don't need guy lines, you don't need a rain fly. This is the complete shelter system from the ground up, and it comes in at less than a pound. It has a single pole structure, which basically just makes an arch over your face so that the material of the bivy is not touching you. When I lie down in it with my head on an inflated Nemo Philo pillow, I still have 2 fists of space away from the top of the bivy. This makes it really nice, especially for people that tend to get a little claustrophobic like me. I did not have any trouble with that whatsoever. The other nice thing about the Outdoor Research Helium is that it can be left open so that your head is just sticking out the top like a sleeping bag, or you can seal yourself in one of 2 ways. The first way is a bug net. So when you have this zipped up, you are completely protected from critters crawling inside the bivy. You can still look around, you can stargaze, you can breathe. It's a very nice feature. If, however, you are in more inclement weather, you can seal the bivy completely with another zipper that actually brings the material pieces together. Now, this can create other problems like condensation, something that I also had no trouble with my first night in the bivy, but it also significantly decreases the amount of oxygen in the bivy. I'm not sure that it would ever lead to real health problems, but it's not something I want to mess with. So I always left it unzipped at least a little bit so that I had some airflow coming through. The bottom of the bivy is a thick enough nylon that it can go directly on the ground. Now, I did use a polycreo sheet my first night out. However, when I woke up, I discovered that I had come off it right at the top where most of my weight was, and I was right on top of very rough, rocky ocean ground. The bivy did not suffer any worse for the wear. The top material of the bivy is a lighter material, but it is waterproof. Again, confirmed. I woke up this morning with my foot box covered in droplets from the night air. None of it got through to my sleeping bag. So I had 3 main concerns with the bivy when I started out: condensation, comfort, and claustrophobia. Like I said, for me, in this particular bivy, claustrophobia and condensation were not a problem. As far as comfort goes, it was pretty much fine. It didn't really feel much more confining than my sleeping bag, and because the material wasn't touching my face, and I was able to easily get to the zippers and modify my experience by changing how much was zipped and where the material fell, it really was a fairly comfortable night. But in the morning, I discovered a 4th concern, which also begins with C, and that is cold. Now, I had read that one of the benefits of a bivy shelter is that it added anywhere from 5 to 10 degrees of warmth to the sleep system. Because bivvies are so small, they contain a relatively small volume of air, and so it can get warmed up by the body fairly quickly, and that heat gets contained easier in a smaller volume shelter. The problem that I ran into is that although the Outdoor Research Helium is 26 inches wide at the shoulder, it tapers quite a bit toward the bottom, down to like 19 inches maybe. Well, I sleep on a 25-inch sleep pad. And what that meant is that when I got it inside the bivy was sort of stretched toward the bottom, and that brought the roof down right on top of the sleeping bag. Now for most of the night, I didn't notice any trouble at all. In fact, I was actually kicking my feet out through a ventilation port at the bottom of my sleeping bag because I was too warm. But in the morning, when it got more seriously cold, I started to realize that every time I turned over onto my side, which is my preferred sleep position, my hip was getting very cold. Just that extra inch or two on my hips was pressing the sleeping bag up into the roof of the bivvy and crushing the insulation, because I feel like I definitely pushed my sleep system to its comfort limits, if not its survivability limits. Now, I don't get signal on my phone here, so I can't tell exactly what the temperature was, but when I make this video, I will post it right here so that you know what it is. And for those of you that want to understand the entire system, I was sleeping on an insulated Nemo tensor, and I had a Sierra Designs Cloud 20 sleeping bag. One of the nice things about a bivvy is that it kind of contains a quilt, so that if you turn around and the quilt lifts up, you're not going to get as much of a draft as you would if you were just outside exposed. However, just like a tent, it can still change your temperature pretty dramatically. So I was really happy that I brought an actual sleeping bag with this particular system. So to summarize, of the 4 concerns I had about sleeping in a bivvy: comfort, claustrophobia, condensation, and cold, only one of those actually ended up affecting my sleep negatively. If I can convince myself to go back to a 20-inch pad, I think it would be just about perfect. I did put a tarp up in this situation because I was going to be at camp for a while, and if it was raining, I didn't want to be trapped in the little bivvy shelter for hours and hours and hours. That's the one thing that you can't get away from when it comes to bivvy camping. If you plan on spending a lot of time at your campground, a bivvy shelter is probably not the best way to go. With a tarp system, you can sit up, you can move around, you can keep your gear dry, and that's not going to happen if all you have is a bivvy. However, if your top priority is moving fast and light, if you are not going to be spending a whole lot of time hanging out at camp, and you want to reduce your shelter weight to almost nothing, a bivvy is a pretty awesome way to go. This has been kind of my season for trying out new kinds of shelters. If you are interested in tarp camping, I have a video about that here as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, hit like and subscribe to Backcountry Pilgrim if you are into hiking, camping, backpacking, and the gear that goes with it. Until next time, I am Doug. Thanks for watching.